Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Hello from the University of Findlay, here in sunny Findlay, Ohio. It's nice out today. I'm your host, Julie Klingler, and I serve as the director of the Wolf Center for Alumni, Parents, and Friends. Today, we welcome back all of our lifelong learning connections community. It's great to have you all back here with us this week. We're very excited to see you all here. Whether you're a loyal UF supporter or you're new to us, we're glad you're here. Many of you are zooming in from places all over the country. We're glad we can offer this virtually to allow a wide range of folks joining us. We've had a great lineup of sessions so far for lifelong learning this month, ranging in topics from history and military experiences and medical and psychology. We've got financial coming up, animal research, community updates, and we're going to talk about volunteerism next week as well too. So for today, though, coming up in a few minutes, we're going to hear from Dr. Allison Kiefner-Burmeister on the food industry's manipulations and how that affects the littlest ones in our lives. She is going to explain what to watch for and tell us how we can combat this issue to make sure the children we know live a healthy life. First, though, before we turn things over to her, we're going to make a couple announcements. Just want to remind you of a few things we want you to make the most of this virtual event. So we always point out on the bottom of the screen that we have a chat feature. So we'd like to ask you to use this for comments and interact with one another, reconnect with your friends, and make sure you use the chat. We also have a Q&A section down there. If you've got questions, please put those in the Q&A because we'll take a Q&A session. We'll do that when Dr. Kiefner-Burmeister is finished today. So you'll want to put those in there so we can address those. Identify yourself with a great name. Make sure you have a good display name, first name, last name, because we use those names in the chat and also for our prize giveaways, which we'll do at the end of the session. So we're going to spin the wheel of names again like we did last week for a special prize. So stay with us for that giveaway. You must be present to win, and we'll do that a little later on. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Allison Kiefner-Burmeister. She received her Bachelor of Science degree from Eastern Kentucky University and her master's and her Ph.D. in experimental psychology from Bowling Green State University. She is an associate professor of psychology here at the University of Findlay, and she has been here on the faculty since 2014. At this time, to get to know her a little bit better, I'd like to ask you to take a listen as I share this following video with you that talks a little bit about her impactful research and the students and children she's helping here at UF. We'll get that on the screen and so that you can see that in just a second. All right, and I've got it queued up and here we go.
So I'm a developmental health psychologist, which is under the umbrella of experimental psychology. What my research focuses on is healthy children inside and out. So I research a lot about eating behaviors and body image in childhood through about 17 years old. We start about 4 years old. So some of the things that I research are how children understand what food is healthy and not healthy, and how their parents may be influencing that a little bit, and then how their school can help influence and teach them about healthy eating and healthy foods. I also study the impacts of social media and media absorption in general on the body image of young girls.
For me, for someone that's interested in medicine, it's really beneficial for me to be involved in this research, because when I'm a doctor in my future career, I'll be able to, some of this research is going to be able to help me be able to better translate to the parents what their behaviors are doing that affect their child's health.
Involvement in my research program is helpful for college students on both sides. So not only is my research, not only are they invaluable to my own research and being able to go and collect data from children, but it's also helpful for them because I take them to conferences. We have been to New Orleans, San Diego, Baltimore, Chicago. This year we're going to San Francisco.
I've gotten to go to conferences and meet actual physicians and speak with them and learn from them. I've just learned a lot from being in the lab. It's made me a better scientist as well, I believe.
They get to go and present research on a national scale with people from all different areas and all different fields viewing their research, their talks, and their posters.
Being a part of this developmental lab has brought me into a lot of experiences with going to conferences, being able to work with kids, and just being exposed to children and learning how to research with them and how to help parents and how to help kids all collaborate together into the research world.
They are also able to write up papers for publication, which we have a few going out right now for publication that my students have helped me with. And that's from an undergrad level. It's very rare to actually see that. So I'm really happy that I can help them accomplish that.
My future is going to be a clinical health psychologist. I'm going to go to grad school to get a clinical Ph.D. And in this lab, we do a lot with health behaviors. And so learning a lot about weight bias has really interested me. And so what I want to do in my future research at grad school through this lab is that I want to be able to work with people with weight bias and take that maybe into a cultural realm as well.
The goal of most of my research is to try to curb the tide of the obesity epidemic in children. Ultimately, my goal would be to have children eat healthier from a very young age and understand how much sugar is in the different foods that they're eating to try to eat less sugar specifically.
And at this point, without further ado, I will turn things over to Dr. Allison Kiefner-Burmeister. Dr. Allison, take it away. Tell us more about your research.
All right, thank you, Julie. Thank you for that great introduction. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to see everybody here. This is a pretty big crowd I'm excited about to talk about my research this morning. So as you saw in the little video that UF was kind enough to do for my lab, I research a couple of different things, not only childhood through adolescence with regard to body image, but also eating habits. One of the, I think, most important aspects of eating habits is not necessarily what you are eating and what you're choosing to eat, but why you are making those choices. One of the things that we find to be pretty upsetting when it comes to children and families and parents and grandparents is they sometimes believe that they're feeding their child something that is healthy and good for them because it's considered a child food. But when you actually look past the marketing for that type of food, it is actually not a very healthy choice. But parents and children alike are sometimes being manipulated by the food industry to purchase certain types of food. While the parents are purchasing them for the belief that it is healthy, if you actually are trained to look deeper into that type of food, you can find that it is not necessarily the best choice, and a lot of these choices are contributing to the childhood obesity epidemic. So a couple of studies that I've run in the past, one that I spoke about in the video, and then I'm going to speak a little bit about today, is how we are investigating how the food industry is actually manipulating parents. So without further ado, I'll give you a little brief review of what this type of category of research entails and some of the things that we are looking at. All right, so here what you can see is that we are investigating child eating behaviors, but more specifically within here, we're investigating how the food industry is actually psychologically manipulating parents to spend more money and actually feeding their children things that aren't necessarily healthy. So let's take a look at how some of those things are going to work. This great question pops up all the time. Who chooses what we eat? So when we are trying to get the general public to eat a little bit better, many times the food industry will come back at us and they'll say, we are not making choices for people. We're simply giving them all the choices that they have available to them. And it is the individual that is making the choice of what they actually eat. So the food industry would like you to believe these two facts. Adults choose their own food and parents choose their child's food. So what this would be doing is alleviating the food industry completely of what they are actually doing in their manipulation. But what we know, what we can glimpse today through this presentation, and what I think that we all truly know in our heart, is that neither one of these things are true. And it is actually the food industry that is choosing the food that we eat. And they are marketing and creating pretty unhealthy foods for children. Now, the question is not necessarily anymore who chooses what we eat, because we know it's the food industry. If you go to a grocery store, you believe that you are choosing the foods that you're eating, but it's actually the grocery store that is stocking the foods. So they are making the complete choice of what is in the grocery store. So by the time you get there, many of those choices have already been made for you. We also know that the food industry is not only subsidizing certain agricultural work, but is also choosing different types of categories of sustenance for us, that is making the unhealthy food actually cheaper and making healthy food so expensive that it is sometimes out of reach for us. And anyone who has gone to the grocery store to buy an avocado probably realizes how expensive healthy foods can actually be. If you're trying to stock your fridge with completely healthy foods all the time, you're going to be needing to go to the grocery store much more frequently. You need the time to do that, and you need the money to be able to do that. So they're using all sides of this to actually subsidize a little bit more of things like sugar and high fructose corn syrup that are very inexpensive, and getting people to choose foods that have a lot of those in there, because it also makes the food quite palatable. Now, we are battling the food industry, but that is an uphill battle. It takes a long time, and it is rather difficult to battle an entire industry. So what we are trying to do as researchers is figure out what are some individual ways that we can have parents and grandparents and everyone working with children to choose foods individually to try to help us and to try to make better choices when we are choosing food. So the question is not who chooses what we eat, but how can we make better choices amongst the choices that are already made for us? So here is one category of food that we are specifically going to target, not only in today's lecture, but what can actually be pretty helpful to target in general. We will be targeting sugar. So within the categories of food, there is a category called deceptively unhealthy foods. These are foods that are high in either sugar, fat, or salt, or sometimes all three if you go to Starbucks. They are actually low in micronutrients. So while they have a lot of fat, they don't have a lot of something else like protein or fiber. If they're very high in sugar, then they don't have a lot of something else like potassium or different types of electrolytes. So high in sugar, fat, and salt, low in micronutrients, but they are being marketed as being healthy. So here's some of the ways that that can actually happen. We are going to be targeting child foods today, but this absolutely works for foods targeted toward adults as well. So if you would take the fruit snack, something that is now a staple idea to feed children throughout the United States. So you see a couple of things when you look at this package, if you begin to look closely. They have fruit is our first ingredient. Now, this is an important claim because in the United States, when you are putting nutrients on the back of a package and you're putting ingredients on the back of that package, the food ingredient that is present most or has the most of that ingredient within the package has to be first. They are then going to be put as second, third, and fourth as you descend that line of amount. So with fruit as the first ingredient, what they're arguing is that this is mostly fruit. The next thing that you'll see is made with real fruit. You will see 100% vitamin C, fat-free, gluten-free, no preservatives, gluten-free. What they're basically saying is there's no wheat in this, right? Which you wouldn't assume that there would be wheat in it. It's also saying fat-free, which is something that you often see in foods that are almost entirely sugar, because sugar does not convert to actual fat cells until it's in your body. So there's a little bit going on there, but let's pick out this fruit is our first ingredient. Let's look at that list then on the back of the package, and we'll zoom in a little bit on ingredients. So as you'll see here, their first ingredient is absolutely fruit puree, but their next two are corn syrup and sugar. So let's see how they actually got away with doing this. They split up the types of sugar in the actual fruit snacks. So they put in half corn syrup and half sugar so that both of those independently were less than fruit. Had they combined them and just said sugars, then sugar would be the first ingredient and fruit would be maybe the second ingredient or maybe behind something else. So this is just one way that they are doing what the CDC is making them do, and the National Institute of Health is suggesting that they do with labeling the ingredients, but they're doing it in a manipulative way and splitting ingredients that are sugar so that they can have them lower down on the tier list. So let's look at a couple of different ways that these deceptively unhealthy foods are actually going to be manipulating families. There's a few ways that they're going to do this. Number one, specific health claim labeling. And we'll go through each of these with examples. Number two, general reputation of the food. Number three, deceptive terms that they are using. And number four, the marketing design that they're using, including the color and type of packaging. Let's go to specific health claim labeling. What we see here is number one, the product includes a certain ingredient, something that is a good thing, but they're really labeling on there that they include it. For example, if you have an unhealthy cereal like Apple Jacks, they are going to say on here, good source of fiber made with whole grains. So they're promoting a specific ingredient. As you saw with the fruit snacks, they're promoting fruit as their healthy ingredient. You could also see with specific health claim labeling, the product does not include a certain ingredient. If you take this candy, Swedish fish, they are actually trying to use deception by saying a fat-free food, which again, these sugars are not converted to fat until once they are in the body. So they're saying we do have or don't have a specific thing. When people who are going out to purchase a product see these specific labeling claims, they are more likely to think that food is healthy because they are being distracted by something else. When you're saying this food does not include something, you can add absolutely anything that people don't like. You could have a certain cereal that says does not include fat, or you can say this cereal does not include formaldehyde, something that it absolutely shouldn't include to begin with, but because they're listing it and labeling it, it's making people think, oh, this food doesn't have that bad ingredient. I imagine all the other foods do. So it's going to orient you to that food. And both of these foods listed are not healthy foods and they should not be eaten a lot. So has it always happened this way? If we start to look at the history of the type of marketing that's being done toward child foods, was it always like this? And the answer is largely sort of. That's an interesting answer, right? Because sugar, when it came to children, didn't used to be a bad thing. In fact, it got kids to eat certain foods, so people didn't mind promoting it. If you'll go back about 100 years with me for this next picture, let's take post-sugar crisp. Now, I apologize that this is a little bit grainy, but it is a very, very old photo. So here you see that they are promoting this cereal as sugar crisp. They are not pulling punches. They don't mind at all that this has sugar in it. In fact, that's what sort of made it a child food. You can see the little bear here is a kid sitting at a little kid's table. He's got a little book and he's got his little backpack and all of his textbooks with him. He is excited to eat this, and it is promoted as a cereal, it's dandy, or eat it like candy. They don't mind at all, and they are not hiding the fact that there's sugar in it. When you actually look at these types of sugary cereals, people were just trying to get their kid to eat something. Here you can see the evolution of Rice Krispies, a very, very old cereal. On the left, you have the older, about 70 years old or 80 years old example for Rice Krispies. And you're seeing that this one does not have health claims to it. It says you can win prizes and that it's best for your morning breakfast, but it doesn't have any health claim labelings. Now, they need to have competition in the market. So they are talking about how it protects your child's immunity by putting different antioxidants and vitamins in it. So if we start to look at vitamins, which we will in a minute, you can see how your child getting vitamins from a sugary breakfast cereal is absolutely not the way to go. It doesn't make sense financially, and it certainly doesn't make sense for the health of your child, but this is how they are getting people to choose their cereal over others. Let's look at a little bit more of the evolution of this type of marketing. Here we have an old version of Frosted Flakes, which used to be called Sugar Frosted Flakes. Now that sugar is on the outs and people know that it's not a healthy food, you can see that it has been sneakily removed here. And you can either see some health claim labeling like no artificial colors. Okay, well, they're not colored at all, so I'm glad that those non-colors are not artificial. If we look again at one that I actually lived through myself, you can see the evolution of Sugar Smacks. In the 80s, they were Sugar Smacks. Once you hit around the 90s, they are now Honey Smacks. They are still made in the exact same way, but you see that they're changing that word sugar to honey. Still something that is flavored in the same way, but they're just changing the way that they talk about it. And if we look at that ingredient list, you're going to see a couple of things. You see sugar, then wheat, and then dextrose and honey. And people will automatically look at dextrose. Well, what is that? Well, if you actually look at what dextrose is, it's sugar, a simple sugar. So again, they're splitting up what they actually have ingredient-wise so that they don't have to say that this is such a huge percentage of sugar. So let's look at another specific health claim labeling that we see a lot on children's sugary foods, and that's vitamin C. You've seen it on the fruit snacks. You saw it a little bit on those different breakfast cereals. So how much do you actually need? Children should eat about 25 milligrams of vitamin C a day. That's it. That's really all that they should have. Having too much of that is not necessarily problematic, but it is not needed by the body. And we don't actually have to be making sure that our kids get enough vitamin C each day. It's really going to be in a lot of the things that they're eating as long as they're eating a balanced meal. You don't have to seek it out specifically as long as they're eating fruits and vegetables. We don't need to be as concerned with vitamin C anymore, but this was something that a very long time ago was really important because of scurvy and sailors, but this is not the situation that we're in anymore. If you're eating a balanced diet, you're getting the vitamin C that you need. For example, one clementine or a little cutie, right? A tiny, tiny little orange, kids are getting 36 milligrams of vitamin C. So if you're giving them one tiny clementine a day, they don't need anything else. If you want to make this even more simplistic, one whole red bell pepper has 152 milligrams of vitamin C. So how much do kids need a day for their vitamin C requirement? A slice. And that's all they need. If you're using a breakfast cereal, as they are promoting from the food industry, to supplement your vitamin C, in order to make one slice of red pepper, you need a bowl and a half of cereal. And little kids just don't eat this much. So this is why not only are they targeting us by trying to tell us that this is how you get your vitamins, but they're not even doing it very well. Let's look at a different category of deceptively unhealthy foods within general reputation. So what does this mean? This is sort of a catch-all category for foods that the base of the food, for example, fruit, is known to the public to be healthy. You can also see vegetables being in the same way. So if you're looking through the store and you're trying to find some category of chips or crisps for your kids to eat and you see veggie straws, this is going to be using general reputation. We imagine these are made from vegetables and therefore they will be healthy. But veggie straws are actually not significantly healthier than any type of chip. So they're actually not going to be hugely promotionally better. You have a marginal difference there, if at all. When you're looking at fruit though, sometimes this can get even more dangerous. For example, craisins. Craisins are dried cranberries. They kind of look like raisins, only they're made from cranberries. Well, here's the difference. Grapes, which is what raisins are made out of, are very healthy fruits. They have a lot of great things for you. Cranberries, on the other hand, are actually devoid of nutrients. Besides a little bit of antioxidant material, they are not a form of any actual nutritional value that a child would need. This is why almost every time that you see them, they are going to be included with a lot of sugar. Not only do they not have a whole lot of nutrients, but they're very tart and almost unpalatable in their natural raw form. So what do? they cover them with sugar. And I mean, they infuse sugar into them to make them edible. And they're banking on the fact that people think that by eating an actual cranberry, it is a fruit, it is going to be healthier for them. If you look at the packaging, they don't make any health claim labelings because they can't, because there's nothing in them that would actually be truly healthy in a promotional way for a child. Let's look at how much sugar. For a half a cup of craisins, which is a conservative amount, 58 grams of sugar, or taking 14 teaspoons of white sugar and pouring it onto cranberries. 14 teaspoons. You'd have to do that repetitive move 14 times. And about 73% of that sugar is just from the teaspoons of white sugar alone and not from the actual fruit. If you want to compare that and try to think, how much sugar is that actually? A half a cup and 58 grams, is that a lot or is it not? Well, if you're handing a can of Coke to a child, you know that that is a treat. That is not a healthy decision to make. It is an every once in a while treat, and you're aware of that. You're cognitively aware of that. Well, if you take a half a can of Coke and compare it to that half a can of craisins, 58 grams of sugar. Half a cup of Coca-Cola, 13 grams. From 58 grams of sugar to 13 grams of sugar. But when you're handing your child a half a cup of Coca-Cola, you know you're giving them a treat. If you hand them a half a cup of craisins, you think you're feeding them a healthy food. And that's the difference. It's not to never treat your kids. It's that we need to be aware of what's going on. Let's choose a different one. Sports drinks. Here we have a Gatorade. Now, people long think that when your child or an adult is participating in sports, they are losing electrolytes and they need to replace those electrolytes. The first question I like to have for people is, what is an electrolyte? Often people can't even tell me. They're not even quite sure what an electrolyte is. Well, they are things like sodium, calcium, potassium. Now, while some high-level adult athletes may need to replace electrolytes, this is someone who is doing a high-level sport, an intense sport. Children, when they're playing sports, are not playing to this level. They are mostly playing around, they're getting physical activity, but they're not draining their electrolytes. In fact, children never, ever need sports drinks. They should always just have water. And if someone is concerned about their potassium levels, if you were to actually break down what an electrolyte is, and someone says, my child needs more potassium, we wouldn't think, give them a Gatorade. I bet I know your answer if I were to ask you, if your child needs potassium, what should you give them? A banana, right? Now we could answer that if we're asked the question in the right way. Instead, the food industry is shifting things around for us, doing all smoke and mirrors and saying they need electrolytes, they need Gatorade. 20 ounces of Gatorade is 34 grams of sugar. 12 ounces of Gatorade is 21 grams of sugar. Let's compare that to something that you would never think to hand your child during a sport game. If they came up to you in the middle of their soccer game and said, I need something healthy to go back onto the field, you could hand them a 20-ounce Gatorade for 34 grams of sugar, or you can give them a full-size Hershey's chocolate bar for 24 grams of sugar. But here's the difference there as well. When you're giving them the chocolate bar, the chocolate bar might have milk in it. So when you're looking at a milk chocolate bar, that actually has 24 grams of sugar, but it also have 3 grams of protein, vitamin D, calcium, potassium, iron, and 1 gram of fiber. Many of these things are not even had in the Gatorade. But people would think that we were crazy if during the middle of a sports game, somebody gave their kid a milk chocolate bar. But you're actually seeing a relatively even split here with how you're actually treating your child's health. Now let's jump to those deceptive terms. Now, some terms are regulated by the food industry. They have to be, but some are not. Let's look at some of those terms that are actually entirely meaningless, that they can put on the front of packages that doesn't say anything about the health of the food or how the food was grown. Meaningless terms include wholesome, nutritious, and natural. Even though these three terms don't have any backing by any type of regulation, they can be put on anything. Actual customers assume that if something says natural, it has 17% fewer calories. It doesn't mean anything, and they're allowed to put it anywhere. Now, some terms do have an actual meaning. One of those would be organic. Now, organic, when someone has a label of organic on a food, customers are actually going to assume that that food is higher in fiber, lower in fat, lower in calories, and holds more monetary value than a non-organic food. However, the word organic doesn't mean anything about the nutrient content of the food. It is talking about how it is grown. If it is grown without GMOs, if it is grown with certain animal husbandry, if it is a food that is actually a meat or dairy product. So it means how it's grown, not the nutrient content, but people believe that it also means nutrient content. For example, organic fruit flavored snacks, it doesn't say anything about the sugar there. It has nothing to do with the sugar. It's just talking about how that sugar cane was grown. If you look at this Nature Valley, 100% natural oats, does not mean anything. We can use natural for anything. Now let's move on to marketing design, which you can see a little bit on this organic fruit flavored snack package. Now, when you're thinking about marketing design and you're trying to choose a food that is healthier for your child to eat, we will often go for the naturalistic packaging. That could mean that it has lots of greens and browns. It looks like it's in a forest. It looks like it's farmland, country living idealism on the package. Now, the assumption is that when something looks like it has a naturalistic packaging, customers also say that it is healthier, it's higher quality, and expensive, but good for the money. Again, this has nothing to do with the nutrient content. This is just what they print on the package itself. So bread that is delivered in natural wrap packaging is assumed to be better. Cliff bars, as you can see, are actually going to have that rock climbing, brownish, natural colors, but actually those are filled with sugar and are not a healthy food to eat when you look at the nutrient value versus sugar content. And then you can even see things like kids' Lunchables. Lunchables are where you have that prepackaged little crackers, meats, and cheeses for the kids to eat for lunch. We know that this is not a healthy choice to make, and most people would claim that it's not a healthy choice to make until you put it into brown packaging and call them active packs. And now, even though they are the same thing, they are going to be seen as more healthy. So a question based on all of this would be, where do we go from here? Well, we know that we're being manipulated on the grand scheme. How do we change it to try to curb the childhood obesity epidemic? Well, we can change the industry. We're trying to do this. It's a very, very slow process. They have lobbyists that are fighting against it, and we don't have a whole lot of funding as researchers to really try to go up against the big guys. We could try to change all of the customers at once, all en masse. This is not likely to happen. Changing huge numbers of people based on something that's a food industry manipulation is difficult and unlikely. So what can we do? We can try to change different groups. We can try to go out to community centers, to schools, to daycares, to places of business. We can try small types of campaigns to grow a grassroots effort to try to get the food industry to stop deceptively unhealthy food marketing, just to try to be honest with people, be direct with people, and try to not manipulate. So we can try educational programming like we're doing right now, or public health campaigns like TV commercials, radio announcements, and even flyers and billboards. Now, while we're doing that, while we're trying that on the large side of things, what can you do to help your own family? There are some things that we can absolutely do on the individual basis. Now, how we actually work those out is going to be dependent upon the family, but here's some of the things that we can do. Number one, cook and bake with your own kids and grandkids. Now, we know that kids who actually cook with their families are learning about the foods. They're talking, they're bonding, they're learning about how different foods are made. They understand what's going into something. And when you are making something and when you are putting the ingredients into that food, you know what's in there. So you're not being deceived. You're not letting the marketing trip you up. You're not letting the marketing trick you or deceive you. And you're not letting your kids be deceived either. You are making home-cooked, wholesome meals. Even if you don't have time to do this every single day of the week, as long as you're doing it a little bit, then kids can learn what's in the food that they're eating. Now, when it comes to the way that we are cooking and baking with our kids, we would also suggest that you cook and bake with pure ingredients. So this would mean that as much as is possible, each category of food is actually a true food. If you're making an apple pie, you have apples, sugar, wheat, eggs, butter, milk. You have all these actual base ingredients, and that you're not using pre-processed or pre-canned foods where the children wouldn't necessarily know what's going into it. Now, how do you actually get these ingredients? And then when do you teach kids about what those mean? We suggest teaching kids about the farm to table cycle. So maybe they know what an apple is, but maybe they don't know what it grows on. And we see this consistently, especially from kids who don't have exposure to a whole lot of farmland. They may see a peanut and they know that it's a peanut, but they don't know where peanuts come from, right? They don't know how they grow or where they grow. The same thing about animal products and dairy products. So one of the things that we suggest is that you take kids, if at all possible, to farmers markets during the summer months. It doesn't have to be every week, just sometimes, and talk to the farmers. Ask them how these things grow, where they come from. Even from the time that kids are very, very young, let them see, feel, and understand basic foods, actual fruits, vegetables before they're canned and tinned and put on the supermarket shelves. Visiting apple orchards, visiting places that have pears and pumpkins, and trying to visit farms at all cost will allow kids to understand what is natural and how things are actually processed, and they will be less likely to be manipulated by the industry. If you don't have access to these types of places, which many people don't, when you go to the supermarket, we suggest that you shop the walls. This means try to stay on the edges of the supermarket as much as possible, venturing into the center rows only to get things like flour. That is also a base ingredient. If you can picture really any supermarket that you go to, you're going to see that the vegetables and fruits are on the sides. A lot of them need to be refrigerated. They're on those sides. You also see that breads from the bakery section are on the sides. As you walk around the back of the grocery store, you're often going to see things like actual meat that has not been pre-cooked or pre-tinned, but you're seeing that actual meat, you're seeing those actual dairy products. So shopping the walls can bring you to a better health decision for your family because you are buying those base ingredients. So overall, I want to leave you with a couple of things. First of all, food is not the enemy. Okay, absolutely, food is not the enemy. We all need it multiple times a day. And when it comes to living traditions within your own family, we know that we need to start understanding how to choose better food. Food is good. Read the labels and know what's in it. Now, what is food again? Food is culture. We need to transmit culture, and often this is done via food, holidays, celebrations, and even baking together on a Sunday. Food is bonding. This is how one of the main ways where kids can learn stories about their past, about their family, and connect from time, not only over eating the food, but also making it. Food is family. Having this actually be a transmission of family values and discussing past history and even discussing what's going on in the world over making food. So we know that food is actually good. It's good for us and it's good for our emotion, but it's been stolen by the food industry. They have taken over this entire family tradition and they've pre-packaged it and they've put a bunch of sugar in it and they're charging us way too much money for it. So what do we do about food? Take it back from the industry. We have the opportunity to help our kids and we have the opportunity to curb the obesity epidemic, but we have to think about it, we have to concentrate, and we have to take it back from the food industry. All right, I hope that you all enjoyed learning a little bit about deceptively unhealthy foods today. If you have any questions at all, please type them into the chat box, and Julie will help me with answering all those questions. So
Great.
thank you.
Thank you. Such a great presentation. Learned so much. I knew you were going to talk about shopping the walls. And so so I had made a note of that because I was going to ask you if they hide things in the walls, though. I mean, you know, for those of us that routinely shop those walls to try to get some healthy stuff, what do you see that they hide in there intentionally that are not good for us? Any examples?
Right. So one of the things that we would just want to make sure of, especially if you are cooking with kids, when you're trying to get those ingredients as you're shopping the walls, stay away from the things that they have prepackaged, right? So if they have already taken these ingredients, but they've put them into a dip, and that dip is already labeled as a dip, try not to get that one. If you want to make that dip, that's wonderful, but get those ingredients, right? So potato salad, if they've already put it into a potato salad container, we know we can make potato salad. It's one of the easiest things in the world, right? So we don't have to do this again every day with kids. Absolutely not. That's undoable. But when you're concentrating on maybe having a family day, that's really one of those things that can help. Not every single day, but just when you can.
Mm-hmm. Good. Tyler writes in the chat that he and his wife found that by cooking with their kids, they're proud of their effort, right? So that just increases their pride, and then they'll actually eat certain vegetables, he says, that they previously rejected when they weren't involved in the process. So that's a great way to get them involved. And I love how you talk about bonding with family members so that you know, it's really just get them involved, get them excited about it. And it's a learning moment. It's one of those teachable moments, they say, right? So
right, exactly.
Yeah, I love that. We do have a couple of questions. So we'll start with Richard. Richard has more of a statement, but thought you might want to chime in on this one. So Richard says, thank you for your insights. I'm a retired industrial chemist and have been concerned with the greenwashing of many commercial products, but have overlooked foods. I will pay more attention. So can you tell us a little bit about the greenwashing that Richard refers to?
Oh, absolutely. And he hit the nail on the head. That's actually what we would call this. I didn't use that term today. That is absolutely what we would call this, though, greenwashing. So you will see greenwashing a little bit like we all know that we should use less plastic, right? We should use fewer disposable plastic bags. We should lessen our carbon footprint, right? Our carbon emissions. And a lot of the ways that they would do that is by trying to make products green. So for example, my reusable water container here right now, right? Like, so using this instead of a disposable or even a recyclable plastic bottle, this is going green. So we see this also in the food industry too, when green would mean things like healthier and organic and back to the earth. So these products, we would absolutely call them greenwashed, especially the ones that have the naturalistic packaging on them. So those fruit snacks that have like the woods and the mountains on the front of them, but they're still just candy, that's a greenwashed thing. They're making you think of nature and natural elements, and they say organic, but on the inside, it's just candy. It's just candy like anything else. So we don't mind if kids eat candy. This is a really important point. We don't mind if kids eat candy. We don't mind if they have a fun Easter and Halloween and eat candy, but we want them to know what they're eating, right? When parents give them candies and sweets, we want them to be knowledgeable of the fact that this is a candy or a sweet. So we don't care. They can make the decision of how much sweet they give them, but we just don't want them to be accidentally giving them candy, believing that it's fruit, if that makes sense. So greenwashing is going to be the enemy in that.
So that really is where the deception lies. That's the deception. That's where they learn that there. Interesting. Edward in Virginia contains no or low high fructose sugars. What does this mean, that statement?
That's a great question. So they're talking about high fructose corn syrup often, or high fructose syrups in other way. So most of the sugar that we think about is derived from actual sugar cane. Another way that we can get sugar is from corn, and one of those sugars is going to be high fructose corn syrup. Now, once those go into the body, they're acting basically the same, but high fructose corn syrup is very cheap to produce. Now, if you look at something like actual pure honey, like actual honey from actual honeybees, not only is this sugar, but it has antioxidants in it, and it has some very helpful different things in it for us, because that's sort of that natural sugar. But if you're looking at sugarcane or high fructose corn syrup, those are going to be very similar in the way that they react to their body. They're giving a lot of negative things to your body, and they're not giving a whole lot of positives. They're not giving those like nutrients, vitamins, and minerals or anything like that. Now, in the past, adding sugar to something was a way to add calories. It was even helpful because undernutrition was the problem, right? Especially if you look back to the Great Depression and before, undernutrition was an issue. So getting kids to eat sugar would have been fine. It would have added fat and calories to them. But now we need the opposite. We are over nutrient as a population, which in some ways is a good thing, and in some ways is not so good. And that's where that high fructose corn syrup, it's basically just going to be sugar, but it's subsidized by the government and it's very cheap to produce.
Yeah, and you mentioned honey, and I think we're fortunate living in Northwest Ohio that that although we have some luxuries of urban life, but really there's so much rural influences around. We've got access to farmers markets right here. I think downtown Findlay has a great one, and honey that's made on farms where we can just stop and buy it. And I love the idea also of orchards. I mean, how fun is that in the fall to visit those orchards and get those fruits? Strawberry patches is another one where you pick your own berries. All of those things can be fun activities that grandparents or friends can do with small children, and really teach them in that moment as well. So great ideas for healthy learning and living. Joyce asks, does portion control come into play?
Oh, absolutely it does. Now, what we actually have within our bodies, I'll try to be a little bit brief on this, but we have something called satiety signals within our stomach. And these satiety signals are going to be regulating the hormones and the actual sort of chemical cues that our body gives us when we are full. So if your satiety signals are functioning well, like they do when you're a child, if you eat even a little bit, like about the size of your fist, as a little kid, you're going to be full. Now, if you eat slowly and you eat the right foods, then after you actually reach a certain point of satiety or fullness, you will get the chemical signal to your brain of a satiety signal, and it will tell you, I'm full now. And it makes food stop being tasty. It actually brings down our desire for food. As we eat, the food doesn't taste as good anymore. You can think about eating a cheesecake. If you eat like the first 2 bites, it's really tasty. But if you're trying to eat the full thing, it kind of doesn't taste as good toward the very end. Your satiety signals are working. So when you're little and you're able to graze food, so you eat healthy foods kind of all day long, like a little kid will go up and grab one thing and grab another and wander around. You can think about toddlers toddling around with a piece of food, right? This is how they eat. This is actually better for humans because as hunter-gatherers, what we would have done in our environment, our natural environment, would have been walking all day and kind of eating kind of throughout that day, maintaining our satiety signals. Now, unfortunately, now we don't have the luxury of doing that. A lot of us have desk jobs, right? So we have to eat a meal, eat right then, and then not eat for a long period of time, and then eat a big meal again. So portion control is trying to stop us from overeating, because every single time that you overeat past your satiety signal, so your satiety signal goes off, it says I'm full, and you eat more, you're damaging that satiety signal. And what we know about that is they tend to not grow back once they're damaged. So if a kid is continually asked to clean their plate and they eat past their satiety signal, by the time that child is a teenager, they won't have satiety signals anymore. So they won't really get that signal that they're full. So they'll continually eat too much. So that's one of the things that we try to do with portions is allow kids to eat healthy foods until the point where they're full and then stop eating. And then eat healthy foods to the point where they're full and stop eating. And that's where those portions can really come into play, allowing the child to decide when they're full, but at the same time, trying to make sure that they're eating generally healthy foods while they're filling up.
Yeah. I have one granddaughter who is very certain about when she's full. Other kids, not so much. that I know, but this one just knows. When she's full, she says, she makes that statement loud and clear, pushes her plate away, and she is done. And she means it, which, so I always think that's so funny. But you talked about health effects. Can you give us a summary of just some of the health effects that you see in the children that you research? Some certain diseases and other things where some of these healthy, non-healthy behaviors and some of the foods that they're eating lead to some of these things. What can we watch for?
Oh, absolutely. So the first thing to really make a statement about is that the children, while they're growing, they're getting bigger, right? And they are actually growing based on the foods that we give them. So if a child has a very restricted diet that is not a healthy one, like if you think about the kid who is a very picky eater and eats only like macaroni and cheese and chicken nuggets, the problem is as their body's growing, they're lacking significant nutrients. So they're actually not going to be growing in a healthy way for their brain. Their brain is not going to be getting all the different types of vitamin and minerals that it needs. Their immune system is not going to be functioning well. They are going to be much more likely to end up developing type 2 diabetes when they're older and having unfortunate weight issues. Now, these weight issues lead to a lot of different things in adulthood and are correlated with a lot of things. So it's not necessarily that weight alone is causing a lot of these disorders, but they're coming from the same place, right? They're coming from that sedentary lifestyle and inappropriate eating habits. And if we eat a very restrictive or picky eater diet when we're young, we're much more likely to maintain that throughout the rest of our life. So we always suggest that when you're trying to feed a kid and you're trying to introduce a food, you don't introduce it once or twice, it's 10 times. Mm-hmm. You introduce a food 10 times to a kid until they're finally allowed to say, in 10 different sessions, mm-hmm. spread out between months and even years until they're allowed to say, I don't like it. So they have to do try a couple of bites before you say no. Because yeah, we are seeing things like type 2 diabetes, which actually didn't used to exist in children. And it's over the past 20 or 30 years that we've started to see that crop up. The incidence of type 2 diabetes in children was so rare that it was generally not recorded at all. Now we're seeing an epidemic within type 2 diabetes in children with that food industry and sedentary behavior correlating into that weight, insulin resistance, and then that type 2 diabetes and even the very youngest of kids.
Wow. Lots to think about. You've given us great tips and lots of background. I loved some of those old photos and the comparisons between how it used to be and how it is now. And it kind of opens your eyes. Next time I go to the store, I'm going to pay a lot more attention, and be aware of packaging. Because I think
you can't unsee it once you start.
Right. Those Cliff Bars, they look healthy. I know they are. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, thank you so much for being here, Dr. Kiefner-Burmeister. You've done an excellent job of bringing us all this information for us to think about and hopefully move forward with better habits and better ideas of how we can move forward in our lives to bring in the kids we know and give them healthier options. And I'll circle back to what Tyler said. I love that he is cooking with his little kids. That's awesome. And getting them being a part of the process so that they can learn. We're going to switch over and we're going to spin our wheel of names. So I'm going to go over here to my screen. I'm going to share it with everybody. We're going to spin for a winner today. And the interesting thing is that I was out this week running around and thought I found this really great place in Findlay that I like. It's called the Baking Company and Bread Needs. And I thought, oh, that would be a good one. But now I hope that everyone remembers, whoever gets this prize, please make sure that when you go there and buy these beautiful pastries and breads, that you're being completely honest and transparent about serving them at your next event. I'm going to go ahead and spin the wheel and we'll see who the lucky winner is for this gift certificate from the Baking Company right here in Findlay. Let's see, we have, where will it stop? Ann Meyer. So we've got Ann, and as our as our winner. And Anne, if you are here, type in the chat. What we do with this list of names is we drop in the whole list of names from the entire day. So I'm not sure she's here or at the next session, but Anne, if you're here, type in. If I don't see Anne chime in that she's here, we're going to take her off the list and we're going to go to a different one. So, all right, I don't see her, so we will spin it again. So we're going to remove her and we'll try again for a different winner. Let's see who we can, Edward Erner. So if Edward is here, Edward, if you're here, please drop a little hello in the chat so I know you're here. And if I don't see Edward, we are going to spin it again. And I'm not seeing Edward. Oh, wait, hold on. Okay, good. All right, Edward is here. So wonderful. We've got Edward is our winner. Thank you for that, Edward. We'll send the gift certificate to you with the information that you supplied to our office. So we will send that out later this week. So just want to let you all know before we say goodbye today that our next session is coming up at 12:30. For those of you who are joining us, use a separate link. It's not the same link. So you'll want to make sure to use that link that was emailed to you with a reminder for the 12:30 session. This session is going to be great. Every person everywhere should attend this to listen as two attorneys that we bring in, Matt Black and Bob Shuck, come in to talk to us with my colleague Ken, and they're going to talk to you about the 8 essential documents that you need to keep your estate in tip-top shape. So bring your questions with you on that. Make your list during this break so that you can come back and ask them all about what you need to make sure that your estate is in great shape. And then next week, don't forget, you still have time to register for the 10 a.m. session, which features the animal science that's being done right here on our campus with Dr. Brian Whitaker. He's going to share with us his in vitro fertilization and reproductive research that he and his students are working on. And then he's going to share that process with us and how that pertains to similar research in humans as well. So you'll want to tune in for that one. And then you won't want to miss our community update with alumni and Mayor Christina Murin. So she will be here, and joining her will be Crystal Wheats, the Director of Service and Community Engagement right here at UF, which they will talk a little bit about what's going on in the community now and in the future. So register today. If you need help registering, please call our office. We would love to thank you again for joining us here for our session today. If you have previously supported us, we thank you for your gifts. Your generosity ensures that we get to continue to offer the level of excellence that our students and our educational programs deserve. So if you enjoyed today's event and you'd like to make a gift, please visit give.findlay.edu. And thank you all again for joining us. Thank you again to Dr. Allison today, and we'll see you all next time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.